The blast from the explosion reverberated through the streets of Ilaris, throwing Mara off balance as she stumbled forward. The ground beneath her feet rumbled as if the planet itself was fighting back against the invaders. The sky above was filled with the terrifying shadow of Catharan warships, their sleek forms cutting through the smoke and debris, their ominous engines humming like the approach of a predator. Mara didn't dare look back. She couldn't afford to. Her legs burned, and her heart pounded against her chest, but she pushed herself harder, every ounce of her energy dedicated to running, to surviving. She barely noticed the blood trickling from the cuts on her arms, the bruises forming on her body from the broken glass of the window, or the burn of the cold night air against her skin. As she reached the edge of the town, the dense forest loomed. Ahead, her only hope of evading the Catharan pursuit. But the path to the woods wasn't clear. Catharan soldiers, armored and armed with pulse rifles, patrolled the streets in packs, sweeping through every alley and every building with brutal efficiency. Every step Mara took toward the forest felt like a countdown. She could sense the danger closing in, but she refused to let fear stop her. A low, guttural roar echoed from behind, sending a chill down her spine. She turned just in time to see one of the Catharan war beasts emerging from the dust cloud left by the explosion. Its massive form towered over the buildings, its spiny armored hide glistening in the dim light, and its eyes, glowing yellow, locked onto Mara with terrifying precision. The beast was on a leash, held by a Catharan soldier, who commanded it with an iron grip. But the war beast's attention was focused entirely on Mara, its hunger for human prey obvious in the way it crouched low, ready to spring. Mara's instincts kicked in. She sprinted toward the forest, weaving between collapsed buildings and the smoldering wreckage of human homes, her breath coming in ragged bursts. She could hear the heavy thud of the war beast's footsteps behind her, closing in. But the sound of her own pulse in her ears drowned out everything else. Then, another explosion, but this one was different. A sharp, quick detonation, followed by a bright flash that lit up the night. Mara glanced over her shoulder and saw a streak of light. A Catharan transport ship falling from the sky, its engines trailing smoke. It crashed into the ground with a deafening roar, sending shockwaves that rattled the entire town. Mara's eyes widened. That wasn't the Catharans' doing. Someone else was here. Before she could process what it meant, the war beast lunged. The soldier holding its leash was too far away to prevent it. The beast's jaws snapped shut just inches from her, its saliva sizzling on the ground where it missed. Mara dove to the side, narrowly avoiding the creature's massive claws as they slashed through the air, gouging a deep scar into the earth. She hit the ground hard, her breath knocked out of her. But she didn't hesitate. Scrambling to her feet, she kept running. Every muscle in her body screamed. Every part of her was telling her to stop, but she refused. She wouldn't let the Cathara catch her. Not now. Then, as if on cue, she heard it. The unmistakable hum of advanced technology. It wasn't the Cathara. It was too quick, too precise. Something, or someone, was closing in on the war beast. Without looking back, Mara bolted into the woods, ducking under branches and leaping over fallen logs, her heart pounding louder than the war beast's roars behind her. Just as she crossed into the dense underbrush, the ground shook again. But this time the tremor felt different, more controlled, more deliberate. The sound of an engine roared overhead, followed by the whir of a weapon charging up. A sharp, sizzling crack split the air, and the Catharan war beast's growl was abruptly silenced. Mara glanced over her shoulder just as the war beast collapsed, a massive smoking hole now visible where its head had been. It crashed to the ground with a deafening thud, sending up a cloud of dirt and debris. The Catharan soldier controlling it was thrown aside, but Mara didn't have time to process what happened. She knew she needed to keep moving. Before the Cathara realized their mistake, from the wreckage a figure emerged, a human. Tall, clad in dark, tactical armor with a crimson insignia on the chest, Earthborn Legion. The soldier didn't look in her direction, too focused on surveying the immediate area for threats. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. With a flick of their wrist, They activated a small device and a small, low hum of energy flared to life. A cloaking field shimmered briefly over the soldier's body, blending them into the surroundings. Mara's pulse quickened. The Earthborn Legion was real. The soldier moved quickly, effortlessly slipping back into the trees as if they had appeared from nowhere. Mara hesitated for only a moment before she made her choice. She knew they could help her. They had to. Taking a deep breath, she followed, keeping a safe distance, her movements careful and calculated. The Legion soldier was her only hope now. If they could take down a Catharan war beast so effortlessly, maybe they could help her. Help her people. But there was no time to waste. The Cathara were not known for making the same mistake twice, and Mara knew that they would soon realize their most dangerous error, underestimating humanity's children. Mara followed the Earthborn Legion soldier through the forest, her feet moving quickly but quietly across the forest floor, avoiding branches and debris. She kept her head low, peering through the undergrowth. The soldier's movements were smooth, efficient, every step calculated. It was as if they were hunting something, and Mara realized in that moment they were hunting the Cathara. The soldier stopped abruptly, turning to check their surroundings. Mara froze. Her heart pounded, but she didn't dare make a sound. The soldier's visor flickered as they scanned the area with a faint blue light. Then, without a word, they raised a hand, signaling Mara to stay low. Mara knelt behind a thick bush, trying to stay out of sight. Her breathing was shallow, but she couldn't help the nervous excitement building inside her. She'd heard whispers about the Earthborn Legion, tales of elite soldiers who fought the galaxy's worst threats in the shadows. But to see them in action, to know they were real, was both a relief and a terrifying reminder of just how dire the situation was. The soldier moved swiftly, crouching low as they approached the tree line near the town's outskirts. Through the gaps in the leaves, Mara could see the faint glow of Catharan patrols moving in the distance, their weapons scanning for survivors. There were at least a dozen of them, scattered along the perimeter, their motions precise, as if they were trained to hunt. Mara held her breath as the Earthborn soldier gestured for her to follow. They approached a narrow ridge overlooking the Catharan encampment, a massive fortress, its tall walls bristling with energy barriers and guard towers. The Cathara had set up a temporary command center, and Mara could see the flickering lights of their advanced tech as they processed the data they'd gathered from their hunt. Then she saw them, the children, in cages. Human children, tired, dirty, and frightened, were being held in a containment area just outside the fortress, their faces pale and hollow-eyed. Their hands were bound by strange, glowing restraints that Mara recognized from the Catharan's earlier equipment, high-tech devices designed to suppress their energy, to break them down mentally and physically. The sight nearly took her breath away. "Those are the other survivors," the soldier whispered, voice low but urgent. "They've been captured. The Cathara are experimenting on them, trying to figure out what makes us different." Mara clenched her fists. She could feel the rage burning. Inside her, a deep gut-wrenching fury that twisted her stomach. They couldn't just let the Cathara take them. Not like this. "We're going in," the soldier said without hesitation. "Stay close and stay quiet. We'll get them out." Mara nodded, her heart racing. The weight of what they were about to do sank in. She didn't have time to think, didn't have time to question if it was the right thing. There was no time for hesitation. As the Earthborn soldier moved forward, Mara followed in their wake. They moved like shadows, slipping through the trees with a speed and grace that made Mara feel like she was moving in slow motion. The Catharan guards were oblivious to their presence, too focused on scanning the horizon, too arrogant in their superiority to notice the danger creeping closer. The soldier stopped by a small hidden hatchway, just large enough for them to crawl through. A deep, rumbling hum echoed from within, a sure sign that the Catharan technology was active and running. The soldier pressed a button on their wrist, and the hatch opened silently. The soldier gestured for Mara to enter first. Inside it was dark, the air thick with the smell of machinery and damp stone. Mara's senses heightened as she crouched low, her every step careful, her movements calculated. The walls were lined with strange alien symbols that she couldn't understand. But one thing was clear. This was a holding facility. "Where are the children?" Mara whispered. "Down the hall," the soldier replied, scanning the area. "They're being held in the lower levels. If we can reach the main control room, I can disable the security systems and get them out." Mara nodded, every inch of her being screamed to act, to free the children immediately, but she knew the soldier was right. If they didn't disable the Cathara's security measures, they wouldn't stand a chance. They needed to be strategic. They needed a plan. But as they crept forward, a chilling sound filled the air, the unmistakable hiss of a Catharan warship landing nearby. "We've got company," the soldier muttered, their voice tight with urgency. "We need to move fast." Mara's heart sank. They had no time to waste now. The Cathara had arrived in full force, and it was only a matter of time before they realized someone was inside the facility. The trap was closing in around them. "Nalbar." Soldier turned and locked eyes with Mara. "We're not leaving without them, you ready?" Mara's breath caught in her throat. She was terrified, but there was no choice. The Cathara were monsters, and they had no place here. The soldiers, the weapons, the technology, it didn't matter. They had underestimated humanity. "We're ready," Mara whispered, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. The soldier nodded, and then in a blur of motion they were off, moving faster than Mara could follow. She sprinted after them, adrenaline surging, her eyes set on the children ahead. Mara followed the Earthborn Legion soldier through the forest, her feet moving quickly but quietly across the forest floor, avoiding branches and debris. She kept her head low, peering through the undergrowth. The soldiers' movements were smooth, efficient, every step calculated. It was as if they were hunting something, and Mara realized in that moment they were hunting the Cathara. The soldier stopped abruptly, turning to check their surroundings. Mara froze. Her heart pounded, but she didn't dare make a sound. The soldier's visor flickered as they scanned the area with a faint blue light. Then, without a word, they raised a hand, signaling Mara to stay low. Mara knelt behind a thick bush, trying to stay out of sight. Her breathing was shallow, but she couldn't help the nervous excitement building inside her. She'd heard whispers about the Earthborn Legion, tales of elite soldiers who fought the galaxy's worst threats in the shadows. But to see them in action, to know they were real, was both a relief and a terrifying reminder of just how dire the situation was. The soldier moved swiftly, crouching low as they approached the tree line near the town's outskirts. Through the gaps in the leaves, Mara could see the faint glow of Catharan patrols moving in the distance, their weapons scanning for survivors. There were at least a dozen of them, scattered along the perimeter, their motions precise, as if they were trained to hunt. Mara held her breath as the Earthborn soldier gestured for her to follow. They approached a narrow ridge overlooking the Catharan encampment, a massive fortress, its tall walls bristling with energy barriers and guard towers. The Cathara had set up a temporary command center, and Mara could see the flickering lights of their advanced tech as they processed the data they'd gathered from their hunt. Then she saw them, the children, in cages. Human children, tired, dirty, and frightened, were being held in a containment area just outside the fortress, their faces pale and hollow-eyed. Their hands were bound by strange, glowing restraints that Mara recognized from the Catharan's earlier equipment, high-tech devices designed to suppress their energy, to break them down mentally and physically. The sight nearly took her breath away. "Those are the other survivors," the soldier whispered, voice low but urgent. "They've been captured. The Cathara are experimenting on them, trying to figure out what makes us different." Mara clenched her fists. She could feel the rage burning. Inside her, a deep gut-wrenching fury that twisted her stomach. They couldn't just let the Cathara take them. Not like this. "We're going in," the soldier said without hesitation. "Stay close and stay quiet. We'll get them out." Mara nodded, her heart racing. The weight of what they were about to do sank in. She didn't have time to think, didn't have time to question if it was the right thing. There was no time for hesitation. As the Earthborn soldier moved forward, Mara followed in their wake. They moved like shadows, slipping through the trees with a speed and grace that made Mara feel like she was moving in slow motion. The Catharan guards were oblivious to their presence, too focused on scanning the horizon, too arrogant in their superiority to notice the danger creeping closer. The soldier stopped by a small hidden hatchway, just large enough for them to crawl through. A deep, rumbling hum echoed from within, a sure sign that the Catharan technology was active and running. The soldier pressed a button on their wrist, and the hatch opened silently. The soldier gestured for Mara to enter first. Inside it was dark, the air thick with the smell of machinery and damp stone. Mara's senses heightened as she crouched low, her every step careful, her movements calculated. The walls were lined with strange alien symbols that she couldn't understand. But one thing was clear. This was a holding facility. "Where are the children?" Mara whispered. "Down the hall," the soldier replied, scanning the area. "They're being held in the lower levels. If we can reach the main control room, I can disable the security systems and get them out." Mara nodded, every inch of her being screamed to act, to free the children immediately, but she knew the soldier was right. If they didn't disable the Cathara's security measures, they wouldn't stand a chance. They needed to be strategic. They needed a plan. But as they crept forward, a chilling sound filled the air, the unmistakable hiss of a Catharan warship landing nearby. "We've got company," the soldier muttered, their voice tight with urgency. "We need to move fast." Mara's heart sank. They had no time to waste now. The Cathara had arrived in full force, and it was only a matter of time before they realized someone was inside the facility. The trap was closing in around them. "Nabrar." Soldier turned and locked eyes with Mara. "We're not leaving without them, you ready?" Mara's breath caught in her throat. She was terrified, but there was no choice. The Cathara were monsters and they had no place here. The soldiers, the weapons, the technology, it didn't matter. They had underestimated humanity. "We're ready," Mara whispered, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. The soldier nodded, and then in a blur of motion they were off, moving faster than Mara could follow. She sprinted after them, adrenaline surging, her eyes set on the children ahead. The narrow corridor felt like it stretched on forever. Mara's breath came in quick, shallow bursts as she kept pace with the Earthborn soldier, her mind whirling with thoughts of the children. She couldn't let them down, not now, not when. They were so close. The sound of Catharan footsteps echoed from behind, distant but growing nearer. The Cathara had noticed something. The alarms hadn't gone off yet, but that wouldn't last for long. The soldier didn't break their stride, moving with deadly precision, eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. "We're almost there," the soldier whispered, their voice steady, but Mara could hear the tension beneath the calm. "Stick close. When we reach the control room, I'll disable the security. Then we'll get the children out." Mara nodded, determination flooding her veins. They were going to make it. They had to. They passed rows of prison cells, each one containing humans in varying states of distress. Some were awake, their eyes wide with terror as they saw the Earthborn soldier. Others were slumped against the walls, too broken to even lift their heads. The sight made Mara's stomach twist, but she forced herself to stay focused. The children were her priority now. At the end of the corridor, a set of thick metal doors loomed, the central command room. Mara's pulse raced. The children were behind those doors, but so were the Cathara. Without warning, the soldier raised a hand, signaling for Mara to stop. They both crouched down, barely breathing as the faint sound of approaching footsteps grew louder. One of the Catharan guards was coming, probably patrolling the command center. The soldier raised a small, sleek device from their belt and pressed a button. The device emitted a low, humming sound, and the next moment, a shimmering cloak enveloped the soldier, rendering them invisible. Mara blinked, amazed by the technology. "Stay quiet," the soldier murmured. slipping toward the door with unnerving silence. "I'll deal with him." Mara crouched low, her heart hammering in her chest as she watched the Catharan guard approach. His heavy boots thudded against the floor, his pulse rifle held tightly in both hands, scanning the hallway. He was close, so close that Mara could almost feel the heat from the rifle's energy core. The soldier moved quickly, silently, a blur of motion. In the span of a heartbeat, the Catharan guard collapsed to the floor, a thin dart embedded in his neck. The soldier had incapacitated him without a sound, without a trace. Mara's breath caught in her throat as she watched the Earthborn Legion soldier move toward the control room door, keying in a series of fast, precise commands on the console by the door. The hum of alien technology reverberated through the air, and Mara could see the Catharan security grid flickering, powering down. "Now," the soldier whispered, and the door slid open with a hiss. Inside the control room was a maze of blinking consoles and alien machinery. The walls were covered in strange symbols, and the air was thick with the hum of the Catharan infrastructure. At the far end of the room, beyond the rows of monitors, stood a cage. The children were inside, their faces pale and gaunt, their bodies shackled to the walls. Mara's heart lurched at the sight of them, each one looking far too small, too fragile to be caught in a place like this. They were just children, just like her. But there was no time to hesitate. The soldier reached for a console on the far side of the room, fingers moving with speed and precision as they entered a new sequence of commands. The sound of the Catharan power grid failing was unmistakable, followed by the sudden whir of the door's energy locks disengaging. "Go," the soldier barked. "Get them out." Mara sprinted forward, not even glancing at the soldier as she reached the cage. The children inside looked up, fear and confusion in their eyes, but Mara didn't slow. She pulled at the thick energy restraints binding them to the walls, gritting her teeth as she pried them loose. One by one she freed the children, 7 of them in total, all with faces that mirrored her own fear, her own uncertainty. But there was no time to reassure them. There was no time for anything but survival. The soldier was already by the door, scanning the hallway. "We're not alone," they muttered. "Hurry." The children didn't hesitate. They scrambled to their feet, their small bodies weak from days, perhaps weeks of confinement. But they moved, following Mara's lead. The soldier had disabled the Catharan security grid for the moment, but that wouldn't last long. The Cathara would be on them in seconds. "Follow me," the soldier instructed, leading the way back toward the hatch they'd entered through. "Stay close, don't make a sound." Mara turned to the children, her voice firm but gentle. "Stay with me. Stick together. We're getting out." The children nodded, some of them crying quietly, others too exhausted to speak. But they moved, their collective survival instinct kicking in as they followed Mara through the maze-like corridors of the Catharan stronghold. As they neared the exit, a sharp screeching alarm pierced the air, louder than anything Mara had heard before. The Cathara had realized the breach. The sound of approaching footfalls echoed through the hallways, and Mara's heart skipped a beat. They were running out of time. "Get ready," the soldier whispered, their voice hardening. "It's going to get rough from here on out." Mara's stomach twisted as they emerged into the open air. The Catharan warships were overhead, their engines glowing like a malevolent star, waiting to unleash their fury. But Mara didn't look up. She didn't need to. They had a chance now, and she wasn't going to waste it. The alarm's wail intensified, a shrill mechanical scream that rattled the bones. The Catharan fortress was awake now, fully alert, and its soldiers were closing in. There was no more time for subtlety. The escape had become a race against death. Mara's pulse thundered in her ears as the Earthborn Legion soldier led the way, their movements precise and calculated. The soldier was a blur, a shadow among shadows, while Mara tried to keep up, her breath ragged as she pushed through the panic coursing through her veins. The children were behind her, huddled together in a tight cluster, their small forms barely visible in the dim light of the corridors. Some of them stumbled, their legs weak from days of confinement, but they kept moving. They had no choice. The soldier had promised them an escape, but Mara could see the urgency in their eyes now. The situation was deteriorating faster than expected. The Cathara wouldn't make the same mistake twice. They would hunt them down. They would kill them all. "Stay close," the soldier barked, voice sharp, their words a command as they turned a corner, leading them down a narrow service tunnel. The walls of the passage were made of thick, reinforced steel, and the flickering lights overhead cast eerie shadows across the concrete floor. Mara didn't ask questions. She didn't need to. She knew the plan. Get out, get to the surface, and find a way to reach the outer perimeter. But as the soldier pushed forward, they suddenly stopped, holding up a fist. The children froze. The sound of heavy footsteps reverberated through the tunnel. Catharan soldiers. Mara could hear their harsh, guttural voices, too close for comfort. "Theo?" Soldier glanced back at Mara, their expression unreadable. They tapped the side of their helmet and activated a small device on their wrist. A faint, low hum filled the air, and for a moment, Mara thought they were going to vanish into thin air, but the soldier just motioned to the wall, a concealed hatch. "Go," the soldier whispered urgently. "Take the children. Get through the hatch. Now." Mara hesitated for only a second before she nodded, pulling the children forward as the soldier remained behind. They didn't have time to think. There was no backup, no rescue. It was them, alone, in the heart of the Catharan fortress, surrounded by enemies who wanted nothing more than to see them dead. With trembling hands, Mara shoved aside a small panel on the wall and revealed the hidden escape route. It was cramped and dark, the air thick with the smell of metal and machinery. The children piled through one by one, their faces pale with fear, but there was no turning back. Mara was the last to enter, her heart racing as the soldier covered their retreat, ensuring the hatch sealed with a soft click behind her. The passage beyond was narrow, the walls close, but it led upward, toward freedom, toward the surface. Mara forced her legs to keep moving, ignoring the burn in her muscles, the exhaustion creeping in with every step. She could hear the sounds of chaos from above, distant explosions, the rapid fire of pulse rifles, the roar of Catharan war beasts. The Cathara were everywhere, but somehow she felt the soldiers' presence like a shield, keeping them safe in the dark. After what felt like an eternity, they reached the end of the tunnel, a massive steel door leading to the surface. The soldier moved forward, inserting a small cylindrical device into a hidden slot beside the door. A low, grinding noise reverberated through the tunnel as the door began to lift, revealing the cold, open sky above. Mara gasped for breath as she stepped out into the open, her eyes squinting against the harsh moonlight. The world beyond the fortress was a wasteland, burned fields, shattered structures, and the ruins of human settlements, now consumed by Catharan invaders. The stench of smoke and death hung thick in the air, but there was no time to mourn. The soldier immediately began to scan the horizon, eyes flicking from one Catharan warship to the next. The air above them was heavy with the hum of Catharan ships patrolling the area, their engines casting an eerie glow across the darkened landscape. "We need to move fast," the soldier said, their voice hard. "We've got about 10 minutes before they realize we're gone. We'll be sitting ducks if we don't get to cover." Mara nodded, turning to the children. "Stay low. Follow me." They didn't need any more urging. The children, though terrified, knew that this was their only chance. Their tiny feet shuffled quickly as they trailed behind Mara, her mind focused entirely on one thing: survival. The soldier led them through the ruins, their eyes constantly scanning for danger, ready to act at a moment's notice. Mara kept the children close, her eyes darting between them and the distant Catharan patrols. The Earthborn soldier had kept them safe so far, but Mara knew the real danger had just begun. A loud explosion rang out in the distance, followed by the unmistakable sound of Catharan warships closing in on their position. They were already being tracked. The Cathara were coming. Mara's heart pounded as they reached a half-collapsed building, one of the old abandoned homes from the human settlement. They ducked inside, crouching low in the shadows. "Stay quiet," the soldier whispered voice, tense. "We'll make a run for the forest in 5 minutes. If they don't spot us, we might have a chance." Mara glanced at the children, their faces pale but determined. She could see the same fear in their eyes that she felt in her own chest. The fear of being hunted, of being nothing more than prey. But this time, they weren't running anymore. This time, they were going to fight. The seconds ticked by like hours. Inside the ruined building, the only sound was the ragged breathing of the children and the distant hum of Catharan ships above them. Mara's mind raced as she tried to steady her pulse. They couldn't stay here for long. The Cathara were closing in. They had to get to the forest or they'd be trapped. Mara glanced at the Earthborn soldier. The soldier's face was concealed behind a helmet, but their posture was tense, ready for anything. The soldier had been their protector so far. But Mara could see the signs, the tightness of their movements, the quick glances toward the window as they assessed the situation. They weren't invincible. "We move in 5, the soldier murmured, voice low and steady. "When I give the signal, follow me." Mara nodded, trying to swallow the knot in her throat. She wanted to tell the soldier they couldn't leave anyone behind, but she didn't need to. They both understood. The children had to survive. That was all that mattered now. The soldier turned toward the children, crouching down so their eyes were level with the frightened faces. "Listen," the soldier said, their voice softer but still commanding. "I need you to stay close. Don't stop. Don't look back. Stay with Mara, and we'll get out of here." The kids nodded silently, but Mara could see the flicker of fear in their eyes. They were young, too young to have seen what they'd seen, too young to understand the danger that was still waiting for them. But there was no time to comfort them. Mara couldn't let herself falter now. The soldier stood up, giving Mara one last look before signaling toward the door. 5 seconds, the soldier said, a steely calm in their voice. "Get ready." Mara's heart raced and she checked the children, her eyes meeting theirs, giving them a silent promise that she wouldn't leave them. The soldier moved toward the door, their cloak shimmering into view as they prepared to make their move. Suddenly, the faintest sound, a crunch of gravel, tore through the silence, freezing Mara in place. Her body went rigid. Catharan patrols. The soldier's eyes locked onto hers, and without a word they began to move. The hatch in the floor they'd used earlier was still open, leading them out into the field beyond. But then, crack. A burst of light cut through the darkness, and a Catharan sentry burst into view from the corner of the building. They'd been spotted. "Move," the soldier shouted, their voice raw with urgency. The soldier dove into action first, stepping out from the shadows with lightning speed, a burst of energy erupting from their wrist-mounted weapon. A beam of blue light streaked across the air, striking the sentry square in the chest. The Catharan soldiers staggered back, their armor sizzling from the energy blast, and dropped to the ground. But it wasn't just one soldier. The entire patrol had arrived. Another sentry appeared, this time from the far side, wielding a pulse rifle. Without hesitation, the soldier fired again, narrowly missing. The Catharan soldier retaliated with a blast that scorched the wall beside them. Mara's blood ran cold. The Catharan were closing in too fast. They couldn't outrun them. "Now!" the Earthborn soldier yelled, pulling Mara out of her shock. "Get to the hatch! Go!" Without thinking, Mara grabbed the nearest child, pushing them toward the hatch. One by one, the children scrambled toward the opening, their limbs weak but moving with urgency. The soldier was holding the line, but for how long? A second Catharan soldier appeared at the far end of the building, followed by a massive war beast, its jaws snapping as it let out a guttural roar. The ground beneath Mara's feet vibrated with the weight of its approach. "Go," the soldier ordered again, voice snapping with command. Mara's heart pounded in her chest as she shoved the last child down the hatch. The soldier was holding the Catharan off, but it was clear they couldn't keep this up for much longer. The war beast roared again, its claws raking against the walls of the building as it moved in. The last child dropped into the tunnel. Mara hesitated for a heartbeat, her mind racing with the impossible decision. The soldier was sacrificing themselves to save them, but she couldn't leave them. Not after everything. "Go, Mara," the soldier shouted, their voice raw with command. "I'll hold them off. You have to get the children to safety." Mara's chest tightened as the soldier fired again, the blast lighting up the dark room as the war beast charged. The Catharan. Soldiers were closing in on all sides and the soldier was surrounded. "She couldn't leave them. I can't leave you," Mara shouted back, her voice breaking with desperation. But the soldier's voice cut through her. "You have no choice," they snapped, their voice still calm but with an undeniable urgency. "You promised them. You promised they would survive. Now keep your promise." The words hit Mara like a physical blow. She had to. She couldn't save the soldier. The Earthborn soldier had known this was their fate. They had chosen this, so Mara and the children could live. Mara shoved the last child into the tunnel and, with one last gut-wrenching look at the soldier, she slid down after them. The hatch slammed shut behind her, cutting off the sounds of battle. Mara's heart felt like it was being torn from her chest, but she couldn't stop now. She couldn't think about what she'd just left behind. She had to keep going. She had to keep them safe. The tunnel was tight and dark, the air stale and oppressive. Mara's breath echoed in the narrow space, each exhale heavy with the weight of her decision. She hadn't even had time to process what had just happened, the soldier's sacrifice, the raw urgency of their final moments. She wasn't sure she would ever be able to shake that image from her mind, but there was no time for grief. Not now. Behind her, the children huddled together, their small faces pale with fear and exhaustion. Their feet shuffled as they moved, but Mara could feel their weakness, the remnants of days, maybe weeks spent in captivity. They were broken, their spirits battered by the horrors they'd witnessed, but they were alive, and that was the only thing that mattered. Mara glanced over her shoulder, her eyes meeting the eyes of the children who were still trailing her. They were terrified, their wide eyes darting around as if expecting the Catharan, forces to pounce at any moment. They were small, fragile, and far too young to have experienced the violence of war. Yet here they were, clinging to life, holding on to whatever sliver of hope Mara could offer them. "Stay close," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the tunnel's ventilation. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her. She wasn't just leading them out of the Catharan stronghold. She was now the one responsible for their survival. There would be no more Earthborn Legion soldiers, no more backup. It was up to her. The tunnel twisted and turned, its layout a confusing maze of sharp corners and uneven flooring. It wasn't long before Mara's legs began to ache from the constant motion, the strain of carrying the burden of responsibility catching up with her. Her thoughts turned back to the Earthborn soldier, their sacrifice. They had known what they were doing when they held off the Catharan forces, knew that they wouldn't make it out. And yet, they'd still gone down fighting. The soldier had done what needed to be done to give them a chance. Mara clenched her fists, the sting of guilt threatening to overwhelm her. She hadn't been able to help them. She hadn't even been able to say goodbye. But the soldier's sacrifice wouldn't be in vain. She couldn't let it be. "Mara," one of the children said, her voice shaky, barely a whisper. It was a little girl, no older than 6, her face streaked with dirt and tears. Her hands trembled as she reached out to Mara. "Where's the soldier? Are they coming with us?" Mara froze. Her throat tightened, and for a moment she couldn't speak. The words felt like they were lodged in her chest. A lump she couldn't swallow. She opened her mouth to answer, but the words never came. The child's innocent gaze drilled into her, searching for reassurance. The others looked at her too, their faces filled with confusion, their minds struggling to process what had happened. Mara swallowed hard, her eyes burning with unshed tears. She couldn't lie to them. She couldn't tell them the soldier was coming, not when she knew the truth. She knelt down to the little girl's level, her hands gently resting on the child's shoulders. The soldier stayed behind, to help us," she said, her voice hoarse. "They made sure we could get away. But we have to keep moving. We can't stop." The children nodded, though Mara could see the uncertainty in their eyes. They hadn't fully understood the gravity of what had happened. They were just children, after all. But Mara could feel their fear, could feel their confusion and doubt, and she knew she had to be strong for them. She had to be the one to guide them through this nightmare, to show them that there was still a way out, that there was still a chance for them to live. "Let's go," Mara said softly, pushing back her grief and standing tall. "We need to make it to the forest. The Catharan won't expect us to go that way." With that, she turned and led them out of the tunnel, pushing forward into the unknown. The forest was just ahead, but the path was treacherous. The Catharan had left the outskirts of their stronghold a mess of destroyed buildings and abandoned vehicles. The ground was scattered with debris, making it difficult to move quickly. Every step felt like it was a step closer to being caught. Mara's mind raced as she scanned the area, eyes constantly flicking toward the horizon, looking for any signs of movement. There were no Catharan patrols yet, no ships overhead, but Mara knew that could change at any moment. The Catharan were ruthless, and they didn't forget. Her legs ached, and she could feel her own energy waning. The children, too, were struggling, their faces pale and their bodies stumbling with exhaustion. But Mara pushed forward, determined not to stop. Not now. The forest was close, just beyond the ruin of a collapsed building. It offered the cover they needed, and if they could reach it, if they could hide among the trees, they might have a chance. But as they reached the edge of the debris, the unmistakable sound of a Catharan warship broke through the air, a deep, rumbling hum that vibrated through the ground beneath their feet. Mara's heart dropped. It was too soon. She froze, pulling the children close to her, urging them to hide behind the twisted remains of a wrecked vehicle. Her breath was shallow as she peered around the corner. The warship's engines roared as it circled overhead, its searchlights scanning the ground below. They couldn't be seen. Not now. But the Catharan had spotted them. The Catharan warship's searchlights cut through the darkness like 1,000 prying eyes. The engine hum reverberated in the ground beneath Mara's feet, shaking her to her core. They were so close. Too close. She could hear the ship's low growl of engines, the mechanical whine as it adjusted its trajectory. The Catharan were circling, hunting, and they were on the verge of finding them. "Stay still," Mara whispered, her voice barely audible, trembling with tension. She pulled the children closer, crouching low behind the ruined vehicle. The wreck was their only cover now, its twisted frame offering them meager protection. The Catharan ship passed overhead, its lights sweeping over the landscape, lingering, just a little too long on their position. Mara's breath caught in her throat. Her eyes flicked from the children to the sky, scanning for any signs of movement. One wrong move and they were dead. The ship moved on, its searchlights swinging away. A few heartbeats of silence passed, but Mara knew this was a brief reprieve. They had only a few moments before the warship's sensors would sweep back. She couldn't afford to wait. They had to move now or they would be discovered. "Follow me. Stay low," she said, her voice steel-strong despite the fear gnawing at her. She reached for the nearest child, her hands trembling as she gripped the little one's arm. One by one, the children obeyed, slipping out from behind the wreckage with all the stealth they could muster. Mara's heart was pounding so loudly in her ears that she couldn't hear the children's soft footsteps behind her. The air was thick with the smell of smoke and destruction, but she kept pushing forward, urging them toward the cover of the forest just beyond the wreck. Every step felt like an eternity. Then, just as they were nearing the edge of the ruins, a voice rang out from above, sharp, metallic, and deadly. Target acquired. The Catharan warship's engines roared, a deep bass hum that echoed through the trees, and a massive energy beam lashed down from the ship's underside. The ground around them exploded in a shower of dirt and stone as the beam scorched the earth. It was a warning shot, but Mara knew better than to take chances. "Run!" she yelled, her voice cracking with desperation. Without thinking, she bolted forward, pulling the children along with her, urging them to run, to move faster, faster than they'd ever moved in their lives. The forest was so close. She could see the trees just ahead, their silhouettes dark against the moonlit sky. They had to reach it. They had to. The ground shook as the warship made another pass, its weapons charging for another attack. The Catharan soldiers were already descending, dropping from the ship's hull with the practiced precision of a lethal hunting party. Mara could hear their heavy boots landing in the ruins, their voices growling in alien tongues. They were on the ground now. There was no more hiding. The children were lagging behind, their small bodies exhausted, their faces streaked with fear. Mara looked over her shoulder, seeing their terror reflected in their wide eyes, and her heart clenched. She couldn't afford to look back again. She couldn't stop. "Keep up!" she shouted, her voice hoarse with fear. "The forest is right. There, you can make it, keep going." They ran, the sound of the Catharan soldiers' footsteps growing louder, closer. Every time Mara dared to glance over her shoulder, she could see the glint of metal, the shadows moving faster, closing the distance. Her chest burned with the effort, her legs feeling like lead as they pushed through the thick underbrush, the children stumbling behind her. They were too weak to keep up, too terrified to move quickly enough. The Cathara were almost upon them. Suddenly, the ground beneath Mara's feet gave way with a sickening crunch. She stumbled, her foot slipping into a deep hidden pit. Her knees hit the ground hard, pain shooting through her legs. For a moment, she thought she might collapse entirely, but there was no time for that. There couldn't be. The children were still moving, barely. But they were ahead of her now, and she couldn't lose them. She pushed herself up with every ounce of willpower, gritting her teeth as the pain coursed through her. But then, a blast of energy screamed past her head, the searing light narrowly missing her as it tore through the trees. She spun around, heart leaping into her throat. The Catharan had fired. They had fired. Mara's breath hitched. This was it. The Catharan soldiers were closing in, their rifles aimed straight at her. The children were still ahead, but if she didn't act fast, they'd be caught too. Just as she began to turn, something exploded in the distance, sending a shockwave through the forest. The blast knocked her off her feet and the ground trembled beneath her. For a moment, everything was chaos. Smoke, fire, the roar of distant weapons, but then, out of the haze, a deep, rumbling voice echoed through the trees. Earthborn Legion. Mara's heart nearly stopped. That voice. It couldn't be. She turned, toward the sound just as a massive figure emerged from the shadows, a hulking shape clad in battle armor and wielding a weapon the size of a small vehicle. It was the Earthborn, the very same Legion that had come for the soldiers. And now, they were coming for her.